welcome back. Thanks for joining our video series on inclusion and belonging. I'm Sally Hansen. I'm here with my colleague Jackie, and we're thinking about what are the ways that we can ensure that we're intentional about our design so that we're thinking specifically about inclusion and belonging for every child, every family, and for us as the professionals providing supports. So you might want your activity guide that goes along with the supportive, welcoming environment because there's some places in there for you to pause and do some reflection along the way. So the first thing is when you think about the places where you care for or educate young children, and you're thinking about the physical space, the actual places where children are showing up, what do you want it to feel like in your environment? If you asked children, what does it feel like here? Or asked families, how does it feel when you walk in? What would you hope they would say? And right along with that is what are the experiences that you hope children will have in your environment? What do you want them to be able to do or feel or express? What interactions do you want your environment to facilitate? Just take a moment and think about what are the things you hope for in your space, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so you've got given some thought to what it is you hope people feel. Jackie, when you think about the feeling of a physical space, we talked about this in the introduction to caring environments. Is there anything that you hope that a space would feel like?
I actually was getting emotional a little bit when you were asking that question. What do you hope kids and families and one another experience? And we said this in the introduction. As we get to know one another more, we know that that will be different for different children and families. I put myself back into the last year of my daughter's time at her inclusive childcare center, my younger daughter, who's non-disabled, Goldie. And I pictured their classroom right away because the welcoming environment was maybe there would be some calming music, but there was always a warm, hello, we're so glad you're here. We're so happy. Some choices for them to explore the different opportunities that are available under enough supports where they understand the routine and there's supports that meet them where they are. And there's enough choices that today I have so much energy and I want to go and do this, but this day I'm feeling like I'm having a little bit of a harder time saying bye to my grown-up or whoever brought me here. And so I want a little space to have more of a soft landing where I can kind of cozy up and do what I need right now. So I guess just responding to the actual people in the space and also things that make us know and feel that the space was created with us in mind. We don't have to change ourselves to fit the space or fit the activities. It's all been designed with us and with us in mind, I think is what comes to my
Yeah,
mind when I think about that.
I was thinking about a personal experience. We often have opportunities to present at conferences or to participate in conference sessions. And when I walk into a conference space that I'm going to be presenting in or participating in, if I walk in and it's a bunch of theater seats really close together and not a lot of space, I know I just don't feel as comfortable as I would if there was a table or a round table or something. Now, that's a personal preference. Other people might be perfectly fine in those theater seats, but I think there's some common thread that there are things that make us feel more welcome, more comfortable, a little more at ease is maybe the word I would say immediately. And so when we think about this for young children, and they're coming into these spaces, especially if children have a variety of support needs, what are the things we can do immediately to put them at ease and to make sure that they have what they need?
I actually think your example there of the stadium seating, it got me thinking about how the environment is important. We've been thinking more lately about how we can be connected to our environments and things like that. But what you said was where we walk in, if you and I are presenting, you're always so great about what's the purpose, what's our goal for this, what do we want to accomplish, what can we accomplish,
Mhm.
right? And I was thinking about when we walk in and it's stadium seating, we know we kind of have to change our expectations for ourselves and what we're going to be able to accomplish that day if it's a 3 hour session and we can't offer as much movement choices or as much unique or different collaborative opportunities. But I was thinking about that as a child. If I walk into an environment that is maybe not set up to my strengths, what kind of messages do kids receive or families receive about what they're going to be able to do and accomplish in that space too? And I never thought of it like that until you gave that example.
Yeah, like what limitations can I put on
Yes.
myself already as we
Uh-huh.
walk into the space? And
Yes.
so, so as we think about supportive, welcoming environments and why they're important, to be honest, I had to be convinced that they were an important part of this series. And so when I share those stories about like my experiences, that's me trying to make sense of it too. And I'm convinced that it's important. So if I had answered the questions, what do I want children to feel when they walk in? I would have said comfortable, at ease, welcome, excited. And what experiences do I want them to have? I want them to have opportunities to connect with their friends, with the materials, with the adults in ways that feel good to them because the environment is set up in a way that works. So, when we think about co creating supportive, welcoming environments, the first thing I want to say about the word co create is really we do believe that doing this with families and with children and with one another is what leads to belonging. I can't pick for Jackie what it would feel like to walk into a space and feel like she's welcome and she belongs. I have to learn from her what is that? And then we have to decide together how do we do that in our spaces. And so co create really just means we learn from one another. What do you need? What do I need? What do you love? What do I love? What's okay with you? What's not okay with you? And then we design our space with all of that information so that everyone sees themselves in the area. And so when we think about designing a welcoming layout, we're going to start with some things that we know work for most kids, and then we're going to get to know the actual children in our classroom, in our childcare center, the families that we serve, and then we're going to hone in on what's really important to each of us. And in that, we are including ourselves as the teaching team, the professionals who are in the space all day. Then we want to make sure we have that flexible access. And we use the word inclusive engagement. So, inclusive engagement is you're interacting with this in the way that works for you, but towards the intended outcome. Flexible access and inclusive engagement means you're getting the intended outcome of circle time, even if your engagement at circle time looks different than maybe some of your other peers. And then, as we've already said, representing every child and family in the environment. We need to see ourselves in it. You'll hear us say throughout this series things like in your preschool classroom or your childcare space or in your family home center, because we want you to see yourself in the work we're talking about. And so we need to also be thinking about how do we do that for children and families and making sure they see themselves in the spaces as well. So, Jackie, when we look at this designing a welcoming layout and you think about creating that space where every child knows they belong, just by the way the room is arranged, are there things that stand out for you?
For sure. I think, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the intentionality that taking the time to draw it out and really collaboratively design it with your team demonstrates. When I was working in the childcare center, we would do things like this. We would go through the routines of the day and the plan with all of the mobility supports that the children in the classroom were going to use that year to make sure that they could access things and they could reach what they needed.
I think what you're saying, I remember you saying you had a child who used a walker and y'all got on your knees and used the walker to
Absolutely.
make sure that it
Yes.
worked. Yeah.
Or sometimes we wonder like, oh, well, we do have this up on the wall, but like we were moving through the environment at the level of kids to make sure we were kind of experiencing it how they were experiencing it. I love that there's different designated areas because it helps our brains to learn when I'm in this corner, this is a quieter corner and my body can even start to feel that or sense that, or here's where we gather. And so we might include a bigger rug in the space where we're all gathering in large group, making sure there's enough room. I think I also see places for things with labels so kids can take care of our community together and put our things back and take care of one another in addition to, you know, the toys that we get to play with and the materials that we get to use. And so this is a really comprehensive drawing and you can sense the intentionality and that they were really thinking about themselves and the actual children and families who are in the room as they were designing it together. I don't know if I'm sure you notice other things because we're different people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a couple things that come to mind for me. If you listen to the introduction video, you know I'm a marriage and family therapist by training. But what I think about are a couple of things just from my practical sort of interactions and experiences with programs. And one would be I have heard and understand that people have been trained not to have big open spaces because that invites children to run. And that might be true. And so, as we're moving through these opportunities for reflection, what we're really talking about is knowing the children you have in your space. And so, if you have children who are highly likely to turn wide open spaces into gross motor areas, and you have children who have gross motor support needs and need wide open spaces. That's like a contradiction that we have to hold in mind, and making some decisions about how are we going to teach children how to use the space. We'll talk about that in the next segment around caring community agreements. How do we hold both important things as true at the same time is another thing that we can think about. I also noticed that in this one, this example, the little yellow table up to the left-hand corner says that it's low to the ground. There's a cute little picture of flower vase on there. And so a couple things I want to just acknowledge is that we don't have unlimited resources in early childhood. So if you don't have the opportunity to have a table that's low to the ground, that doesn't mean you can't also be thinking about other ways. Maybe children stand at that table rather than sit, or maybe we think about some adapted seating options. But the little
You're
touches in this classroom, you see they have a little flower vase on there. That's important to this classroom for whatever reason, and it makes it feel homey and makes children feel at ease. You'll decide what are those things for you.
Your example there about having lower table brings me back to working at a small nonprofit childcare center. We would say, does anybody have a table? And will you let Charlie's Pops cut the legs off of it to make us something that we need? And that's this beautiful part of co-creating it together within safety and licensing and all of the things. But oftentimes we would work together as a community to find a solution.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you said it because it's prompting me to say one more thing and then I'll move on to the next slide. Is that what I've really come to understand about about classrooms and childcare centers and communities that work when it comes to inclusion is that they're the most flexible and they're the most open-minded. So if what we're trying to do is ask children with autism or children who have communication support needs or children who have motor needs to come to our already designed preschool classroom that was primarily created for non-disabled children, and we're asking them to fit in, we're not going to get there. We're not going to experience belonging, and we're going to have this sense that inclusion doesn't work. But if we design the environment and everything else with diverse learners in mind, it actually works so great. And we can do that by working as a community. So in this picture, we've got a little bit of another take on a welcoming environment.
This is my younger daughter's classroom from her last year in preschool. And things that I would point out here, you'll see flexible seating choices. You see choices for, do you want to use your AAC device right now? Or would you like to use some of the other built-in supports? The windows are closed because I know they were coming back in from playing outside and they were starting to transition the environment to be a nap time space. So the lights are out, they're singing a calming song, they have a fireplace visual on, but there's different ways of how you can sit, how you can participate, and just be a part of the community. So I thought it was just another example.
Yeah, I think that's so great. So those were kind of all idea number one. Design that supportive environment with the children you have in your classroom in mind. And then idea number two for a supportive, welcoming environment is plan for flexible access and inclusive engagement. And this is where we started to talk about what is inclusive engagement? Well, it means the purpose of story time is pre-literacy, to hear a story, to join in community. How we participate inclusive engagement could be sitting at the circle It could be having our own book. It might be sitting at a table doing a puzzle. But I'm also listening and getting the intent of it. So the inclusive engagement and flexible access piece allows us to see all ways are okay as long as they're within our agreements. And this example is more about music and movement. So Jackie, will you talk us through this one?
Yeah, I think just like you were saying, at large group time, they had a music and movement routine that they did. One of the children could choose, and then they had a visual for today's music choices are a family partnership opportunity each week. A family could choose a song that maybe they sing at home or they love that the kids could all sing together. They love icky sticky bubblegum, or maybe they're really wanting a surprise and the teacher has a surprise song in his back pocket that he's ready to sing if anybody is brave enough to choose. And then within each song there are movement choices, again, Sally, within the agreement. So we could sing it, which means we might use our voices or our AAC device or whatever other ways we sing in our classroom. We might sign it, there's signs involved. We might play an instrument. We could do more than one thing. We could use a scarf because maybe that meets the motor abilities of particular children in the classroom as well. It's just like you said, knowing the various access points for everyone, and then also, as much as we can, offering those choices to everyone. Because some days I might want to use a scarf, and other days I might feel like singing, and that's okay. And also, at least one of those options meets every child in the space.
Yeah, it's about letting go of this idea that a good music time means all
Mhm.
16 children are standing perfectly straight and singing it the way that Miss Rachel is singing Icky Sticky Bubblegum. It means going, what does it look like for our kids in our classroom and the variety of ways that children here learn and grow and express themselves? And not only being okay with it, being excited.
Yes.
And this is just one more version of planning for access that's flexible and inclusive engagement. And so on the left, you see a variety of ways that children are participating in this large group time. Some children have little tabletops that they can be playing with sensory materials. I think there's Play-Doh on one, there's Legos on another. I know that when I'm doing a big long meeting, sometimes I like to doodle. And so when I look at this picture, I think, oh, they've given opportunity for the doodlers, right? And maybe preschoolers aren't doodling, but they're Play-Dohing or they're Legoing because their brains work better when their hands are busy. And so there's respect and opportunity just built right in for that. We also have people who want to sit and fidget. I'm fidgeting in my chair while I'm talking to you. And so, again, those bouncy seats that are fidgety, whatever those flexible pieces are, that's what we see on the left, is that the teachers in the classroom have designed that circle time with all kinds of learning opportunities in mind. And Jackie, what about the picture on the right?
I think the right has a lot of similarities that you're talking about. I know the grown up there is a speech and language pathologist, so offering and providing supports within natural routines. The environment helps with that. She's reading a book. The kids are reading a book while they're also doing a Play-Doh opportunity. Because I know I know Harper is a little girl in that, and she's a family friend, and I know she probably didn't want to touch Play-Doh that day,
Yeah.
but she likes books. And so the grown up knew her enough and had a flexible enough environment that there's a book nearby and we can read the book and talk about the book that relates to the Play-Doh or kind of tabletop top activity that we're doing. So just choice and honoring where kids are, always supporting them to grow. And it's not that they would never encourage Harper to do certain things, but she didn't want to play with the Play-Doh, and they brought her in, and like you said, we're wired for connection. Make sure she had opportunities to connect in a way that was meaningful for her, that also still met the purpose of the activity that they were doing.
You know, I love that because I've been in a lot of classrooms where they were doing a great job in saying, if you don't want to play Play-Doh, you don't have to be at this table, you can go somewhere else, right? Which is
Mm.
great because children should have some choice about where they play, especially where they play. But in this situation, what you're saying is Harper does want to be at the Play-Doh table with her friends and experiencing belonging with them. She just doesn't want to touch the Play-Doh. And I can think of a million times where I want to be with my friends and in the space that they are. I'll use a quick Minnesota example. Boating is a really big deal in Minnesota, and a lot of my friends like to ski, water ski, and I do not, but I like to be with them. I just don't want to do the sport of water skiing, but I want to be on the boat and I want to take the pictures. And so I get to be included and belong with my friends around that boating activity in my way. That's what I see for Harper here. She wants to be with her friends. She wants to be in the Play-Doh area. She just doesn't want to touch the stuff. So what can she do? She can tell the story about it. She can read the book about it. All of those things.
I was almost not going to say this, but I'm going to say it because it's the second time you've made me feel this, is that it's really honoring and dignifying kids as the humans who they are, who have opinions and likes and dislikes. And we're bringing up these examples of, as a grown-up, I get to participate in meetings how I need to. I get to be in this chair and wiggle and swivel around. I get to boat if I want. I get to go do sports, but kind of just talk to my friends and not even know what sports teams are playing. Yay, sports. Like, as an adult, we're offered so many choices that it's reminding ourselves kids are humans too. And every child, whether they communicate in unexpected ways or not, or whether they engage in ways that we might have experienced before or not, they're humans and they have preferences and likes, and it's giving them the same respect that we give one another as adults. And that was a big aha for me as we have been talking about this too.
Yeah, because children don't choose where they go to preschool. They don't choose which childcare they go to. I can choose, I don't want to be in a book club because that book club doesn't work for me. But children don't get to choose. So within that framework, how are we creating experiences in every setting where they do have choice and where they are honored for who they are and they can experience it? And then the last thing we want to talk about is in terms of ideas. We've already talked about the layout of your room, honoring every child. We've talked about those flexible, inclusive supports. The last thing to consider is who's represented in your environment. So this would be a place to pause after I read through your questions, grab your activity guide, and think this through. As your team selects the books that you're using, you're thinking about your materials, your toys, the visuals that you have. What are the identities that you're including intentionally? What cultures? What disability representation? What languages? What race? What family composition are you currently intentionally representing? And we'll give you a minute just to pause and make some notes.
I always say a great place to start is to think about the actual children and families in your space. We don't have to represent every single, I mean, that would be a beautiful community create if possible. But like you said, we all have limited resources. We're all making different choices. And I think starting by representing the actual children and families and grownups in your space, in your community, is so important. I remember being observing in a classroom and hearing a little boy who saw someone who looked like him, a little boy, for the first time, and the joy that he expressed by saying, "Oh, he's me, he looks like me." Like, that will stay in my heart forever about how important this actually is. But if you maybe have spent resources on other things, or, printing off pictures, or having families bring in pictures, having them bring in materials that they have around their home that you could borrow and use in the classroom. It's not go to the store and purchase all the dolls and all of the things. Again, going back to that, when we're co-creating it together, we can lean on one another and really figure it out as a community, how we want to be represented, what we want to represent, and then how we can make that happen. So of course, some examples here. The one in the middle is if we're offering a way that kids can greet one another, we include the languages that children speak at home and English visual words to make sure that children can express some really important critical phrases in their home language, or by pointing, or in a way that matters to them. I'll point one more thing out. That's a picture at the bottom at the childcare center that we worked in. A number of the children ate snack or lunch through a feeding tube. And so when we had baby dolls and we had, a dramatic play centers, we would always include opportunities for kids to practice feeding babies with bottles in lots of different ways, and including feeding tubes. And my daughter still, they take booger sucker things, attach them to their baby dolls so they can continue to eat in lots of different ways. And that's why it's important for it to become, there's no one right way to do anything.
That's
Your
right.
way is a real way. Yeah.
Your way's a real way. And what a time to be alive, because when I started working in this field, translation was real tricky. But now we have Google Translate. We have options. We also can talk to families and ask them what are the top, 5 or 6 things that we should make sure we have available at school for language. And I think we can Dollar Tree a lot of these sort of, feeding your baby through a feeding tube. The booger sucker is not that expensive. We can make some of these things work, and children don't need it to be perfect. Nothing is really, that's not real. So, as we wrap this section up, I think a couple of opportunities for you could be to start with what are you already doing? What are you already doing to create that supportive, welcoming environment, to offer flexible choices? Where have you had success doing those things? What are the ways that you're already representing the children and families in your community? And where do you want to go from there? Or how do you want to reprioritize any of those things? You might go ahead and draw a map of your environment, like the one that we saw in the video here. You might brainstorm additional ways to increase your flexible access and inclusive engagement, and other ways that you want to represent children and families. There's some cool things in your activity guide that you can work through on your own. And so that takes us to the end of this segment.
I think the next section is we'll be talking about community agreements. We'll see you wherever. We'll be there.